Good afternoon. Welcome to the Mitigation Working Group of the Maryland Commission on Climate Change. I'm Mark Stewart, Climate Change Program Manager at MDE. Note that we're recording the meeting. We've got lots of people with us. Great seeing you all. Is there anyone who is standing in for an MWG member today?
Hi, Mark.
Hey,
Hi, Mark.
Paul.
This is Morgan Ellis, and I'm filling in for Darren Lovoff.
Got it.
And hi, I'm Pauline Races. I'm standing in for Mark Shibist.
Thank you. And I see the comment in the chat. Thank you. Alrighty. Great. We are going to open today's meeting with public comments, but before we do that, we're going to get opening remarks from our co-chairs. So I'll turn it over to Kim Coble and Mike Powell.
I'll just, if I can start off by congratulating all the members for such a good job getting us narrowed down and focused down to 5 or 4 priorities. Was a good deal, a good job, and well done. And the fact that everything had 9 or 10 votes does suggest that there are a lot of similar thinking among people for at least many of the proposals. So congratulations.
And let me confirm that you guys can hear me okay? Because
Yes.
I am coming through a phone and through the video as well. So anyway, yeah, I want to thank everybody for the work that's gone into getting us this far, this fast, which is unprecedented, given all the years that I've been on this mitigation work group. So hopefully we can have a good conversation today and continue to make some progress. Thanks, Mark.
Great, thank you both. Are there any members of the public who would like to make any comments at the start of this meeting before the Mitigation Working Group members focus the rest of their time on reviewing their priority recommendations and do some wordsmithing to the recommendations before calling them final? I see a hand up from Jeff. Is there anyone else that would like to make a public comment this morning or this afternoon? All right, I've got 2 hands. Great. All right. Well, Jeff Silva, go ahead, please.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for this opportunity. My main comment is concerning the combination of recommendations from the Mitigation Working Group of its numbers 1 and 3. I think that's good. I concur with all those. If that goes through, then we'll have 4 that could be submitted. I think they're all good. I mean, I think they're all necessary. About combining the recommendations 1 and 3, I would say that we should require that both the strategic and clean energy projects are required to concurrently mitigate greenhouse gases and provide energy to reduce Maryland's importing of electricity. Basically, and the area where I could see that is the trapping of methane that's emitted from sewage treatment plants, agricultural animal waste treatment, and also the solid waste landfills. I submitted a letter to be entered into the meeting notes, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much. Continue, and God help us all.
Thanks, Jeff. Dave Grossman.
Hi, everybody. Just one quick comment. As some of you know, I'm a senior advisor. I'm with Greenlight Consulting and a senior advisor to Climate Law and Policy Project, which has been working to study, cap and invest, and I noticed it was not included in here. The mitigation working group and the commission have mentioned cap and invest in the past. So I just wanted to sort of ask/reiterate that as the MWG puts forth its recommendations this year, it has been said before that the prior recommendations are still live. If there is some way that that can be conveyed more explicitly as the recommendations are put forward to the full commission, and perhaps the commission as they release their full report, just to make clear that just because something is not listed this year does not mean it is not still a recommendation that should be considered. And if you want to call out a few, like for example, cap and invest, that'd be lovely. But if not, just the principle that the mitigation working group's prior recommendations and the commission's prior recommendations are still active and should be pursued. Thank you.
I think we had set, the steering committee had suggested a baseline that, except to the extent that there's a change made, and I don't think any of these change anything, then any prior recommendations were considered to still stand.
Thank you for those comments. And I see one more commenter, Mike O'Halloran. You can go ahead.
Hey, good afternoon, all. Sorry, I'm unable to join via video, but on behalf of the Mid-Atlantic Petroleum Distributors Association, we have serious concerns about recommendation, I believe it's number 2, with regards to adopting a clean fuel standard. And, its easiest way to explain it is the absence of infrastructure, worry about supply. So therefore, if you try and mandate a clean fuel standard, that's going to drive up costs because of the scarcity of the product. As opposed to, traditional motor fuels. Certainly the industry has been working, with refiners on all the way up the food chain, so to speak. But to mandate it, particularly, if Maryland were to go at it alone, that'd be very difficult and frankly just lead to increases at the pump. So with that, we would hope that the mitigation working group would not finalize recommendation number 2 and send it to the full Climate Commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. And I see a hand up from Steve Dodge. So go ahead, Steve.
Thank you. Appreciate this opportunity for public comment. Guess I'm going to take an opposite track from previous speaker, Michael. I'm thrilled, obviously biased, but thrilled that the LCFS is one of the recommendations. We continue to believe, and others do as well, including the state of California, that an LCFS for transportation is really the most cost-effective way to reduce carbon emissions from the now harder to electrify because of the rollback of some of the California regulations, heavy-duty transportation sector. So I'm thrilled that it's in there. As you know, Mark, MDE is working diligently on what I would call the first cousin to the LCFS for transportation, and that's the clean heat standard. And so this is complementary to that. And I think, again, may provide the biggest bang for your buck in terms of when it's implemented in reducing carbon immediately from some of those hard to decarbonize sectors, particularly heavy-duty transportation. So really happy it's in there and will assist MDE and others in drawing up regulations and implementation. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. And I see a hand up from Burl. Go ahead, Burl.
Hi, Mark. Thank you very much. I'd like to follow up on that comment as well. Some of the research that has been done by the Maryland Biofuels Task Force shows that the price of gasoline and diesel fuel in Maryland has gone down by as much as 19 cents per gallon because of the addition of the renewable fuel standard and increasing the supply of these fuels. As people may know, that Maryland does not have crude oil production, gasoline production, alternative fuel production, or a strategic fuel reserve. So the ability to sustain biofuels and grow it in the state is important to the economic security of the state, as well as the energy security, environmental security, and personal security because of the reduction in air pollution. So I think there's a pay forward and a pay back, and that the costs that MDE has looked at as far as climate change damage, up to $135 billion is money on the table already that it shows a payback. So when addressing the cost, we need to look at not only the total life cycle emissions, but the total societal cost. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for those public comments. And I see, Mike, you put your hand back up. I suppose rather than getting into what could be a pro-con debate on this topic through public comments, I'll ask if we can come to a close of public comments and turn to the business of the MWG today on discussing these priority recommendations. So what the process that we're going to follow, that we work through with the co-chairs, is to have a work session here where if any members want to introduce any amendments to the priority recommendations, then we can work through any kind of wordsmithing that you'd want to provide. And then after a recommendation entertains any wordsmithing amendments, then we'll bring it to a vote among the whole group. We'll do a kind of a, hands up, all in favor of this recommendation to finalize it. And then any wordsmithed recommendations that are finalized by a vote of the majority of the members will be advanced to the Climate Commission for their meetings, which will start in the fall. Yeah, Arjun.
Yeah, I had submitted on the CEF items, both of them essentially the same since they are merged. An amendment. I don't know how that is going to be considered.
So yeah, I wanted to start there because that's something that I put into an email that I sent out to the members a few days ago. We do have two recommendations that are related to CEF, and also through the online voting, the members identified a top 5, and we've been asked, each working group was asked to advance 4 recommendations to the Climate Commission this year. So there is an opportunity to merge recommendations 1, which is protect the Strategic Energy Investment Fund so that it isn't used for purposes other than strategic energy investments that reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Combining that with recommendation 3, reallocate CEF funds to assure that projects already in the development pipeline receive financial support to assure construction, even if the deadline is not met. So the proposed merging of those is on the screen here, literally just combining that language. Protect the CEF so that it isn't used for purposes other than the strategic energy investments that reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and reallocate CEF funds to assure that projects already in the development pipeline receive financial support to assure construction. So yeah, go ahead.
And Mark, if I've got it right, the Jennifer, who was the originator of at least one of them, would consider this a friendly amendment?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
So to expedite the process, where I'd suggest that we start is with a motion to replace recommendations 1 and 3 in the list with this joint or combined recommendation, and then perhaps entertain any wordsmithing to this combined recommendation. So do I hear a motion?
So moved. Bob Wright.
Thanks, Bob. Any discussion?
Is this where I offer my amendment?
I think that let's vote on the issue of replacing recommendations.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
With this, and then we'll entertain amendments to it.
Yeah.
Hearing no discussion, all in favor of replacing recommendations 1 and 3 with this combined version of recommendations 1 and 3, please raise your hands. Great, we've got majority of members So thank you. You can put your hands down. Okay, so we now have 4 priority recommendations. You'll also note that I made just some formatting changes to the versions that you all most recently saw, and that's just to bring them into the format of the recommendation template provided by the Climate Commission. So providing a brief and concise title followed by a 2 to 3 sentence version of the recommendation, and then context. So anytime you see this italicized font, that is context, and the instructions from the commission here. This language will not be included in the annual report, but is intended to provide further background support or explanation on the recommendation to the commission. Cost estimates are not required. If providing a cost estimate, please indicate any relevant data to support the estimate. So your co-chairs, Kim and Mike, may use this context when they present the group's recommendations to the Climate Commission, but just to double down on this message, the context piece, it won't be voted on by the commission and included in the annual report. It's really just context for the commission to understand the recommendation. Okay, so we have advanced or amended recommendation number 1 to be the combined one and the former recommendations number 1 and 3. So we can discussing any wordsmithing that you'd want to make to the recommendations on the screen. And Arjun, you've already indicated that you have a suggestion there.
Yeah, I actually have an amendment or an addition to that rather than wordsmithing what's there, which is that the existing allocation of CEF to utility bill assistance should be preserved. That I think, because that, we already have more enrollment because of the changes, which is very good. But now what is happening is the amount of assistance per enrollee is declining. And I think it would be pretty serious if the amount of funds that are now allocated from CEF to energy assistance were to be reduced in this way. So I can suggest a wording. This is contingent upon reserving the existing funds allocated to utility bill. No, existing funds allocated to utility bill assistance from CEF should be preserved.
Okay, sorry, take that from the top one more time.
Yeah. Existing funds now allocated from CEF to utility bill assistance should be preserved. And perhaps it can be more felicitously integrated into the rest. I'm not sure, but that's the spirit of what I'm proposing. Open to any friendly.
Got it. All right, and I see hands up from other members. If possible, I guess let's try to keep comments to this amendment proposed by Arjun, but I also recognize I think the hands might have come up before we open discussion on this. So Ian, go ahead.
Thanks, Mark. Two issues here, and it is related, I think, as well to what, even though I did put my hand up earlier, to what Arjun's talking about. I mean, the CEF is used for a number of purposes today, right? It's not just used for solar, and it's not just used for utility bill assistance. So I think as a procedural matter, or maybe it's somewhat substantive, but I don't know. Do we want to list out all the things that the CEF is currently used for? Is that necessary? It is interesting that we're calling out one about trying to preserve solar projects in the queue, but it does raise the question that I think Arjun has identified. what does that mean about anything that's not mentioned here? So I want to raise that, and I'm not sure we want to go through and list the things that are currently funded through the CEF, or alternatively, do we want to get into saying that it doesn't mean we don't want to fund those things? I just want to raise that for the group. And then my second point related, the word assure, I think, is challenging. I don't know that there's any way to assure an energy project is going to be constructed. So I just wanted to raise those two issues, which is, I think, sort of aside from the general substance of the recommendation or the intent there. So those are my comments on that.
Thank you, Ian. Kim?
Yeah, I think in a similar place as Ian, I think the wording isn't correct, because the first sentence is basically saying that CEF isn't used for anything other than it's intended. And then the comma, but we're going to reallocate CEF funds to clean energy projects. And then Arjun's amendment is, I think, just emphasizing the first point, that the CEF dollars need to stay where they're intended to stay, specifically utility bill assistance. So my suggestion is, I guess my suggestion here is that the main point of this recommendation is that CEF dollars remain remain to go to projects that and intent that it was structured for initially, including utility bill assistance. I'm not sure how to phrase in there that we're going to reallocate funds for clean energy, because that wasn't my intent when I first put in the language there. But anyway, right. And Arjun, I don't know if you're okay with that, but that would be my suggestion there.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kim. And, in the spirit of that, I would, after that phrase, including utility bill assistance, and I would simply add, in the spirit of this recommendation, and clean energy projects. And then end the sentence there, because, a lot of the CEF is used for clean energy projects.
Hi, this
Period. Okay.
Hi, it's Jennifer. Sorry I was late. My apologies. I see a couple of issues here. The funds now allocated from CEF for utility bills, that should only go to people with low incomes, who are pre-qualified.
Yeah, Jennifer, it goes to OHEP, and OHEP allocates those funds to utility
Right,
bills.
but what happened last year is they gave $200 million to people that were not qualified based on income. So I want to be sure that our recommendation is that the money from the CEF should go to people who are, part of that low income issue.
Fairly.
And also it says reallocate CEF funds. I don't think it's a matter of reallocating. It's a matter of continuing to allocate CEF funds. It says also reallocate CEF funds to assure that clean energy projects already developed. I don't think it's a matter of reallocating.
Ian,
It's important to allocate CEF funds to assure.
Ian, could you weigh in on that? Should the word be to allocate or to reallocate?
Okay, so right now the CEF is I'll say around half of the CEF funds that MEA gets are used for clean energy projects. Okay, so the other half is used for things like energy efficiency, electrification, transportation, that kind of thing. So I just want to give that context. The caveat here is that while, yes, the MEA is using the CEF right now to fund lots of solar projects, up to this point, I don't think our focus has been on projects that are already in the queue and may have problems obtaining financing or coming to completion due to changes in federal law and policy. That could be a pivot that MEA makes and that the mitigation work group might want to recommend. And so that's where reallocate gets a little tricky, because for sure we are already providing a lot of money for solar and other clean energy projects to date. Does that answer the question at all?
I don't know that I quite got the simple answer, which is if it's accurate, more accurate to be reallocating or allocating.
If it helps, I was going to make the same comment that Ian was. I might be able to expand on it a bit.
Sure.
Because I don't think the question of reallocate for the allocate, it's the wording is important, as the concept was that right now any money put on those projects that are already in the queue get leveraged with a lot of federal money. And whereas renewable energy projects or energy efficiency projects that are not in the queue and a time frame to be able to complete it in time will not get the leverage of that federal money. So the concept, and I'm sure MEA is looking at the issue already, but I'd suggest we weigh in that to the extent that the General Assembly can agree to advance some money to things that are already in the queue, we get a multiplier effect. We get the federal credits that are otherwise going to go away and wouldn't go as far if we spend them on credits on projects that may be entirely equally beneficial for the state, but will not get the benefit of the federal incentives.
Yeah, I mean, I can agree with what Mike is saying, that that could be the position that this group wants to take, that MEA should prioritize, maybe that's a better word than reallocate, to prioritize those projects that are already, in the queue in some way, right?
All right, thank you. Is there further discussion on amendments to number 1 before we call the question? I see additional hands up. Ian, did you put your hand up again, or was that okay? Mariana.
Thank you, Mark. I also want to flag that Ian previously referred to the assure construction, and even if we give the funds, there's no way to assure that it will be built. And I'm still thinking of the right word that we can change it for, but it's like promote, or
we can make it support.
Support, yes.
Well, then we're going to have received financial support to support construction, which I'm okay. My English teachers from the past are screaming in my head, but
No. Let's find something better. We can do it. I know we can.
So I was going to say, I don't think it's construction. I thought the word would be completion.
To support completion. To encourage completion. Yeah.
The one thing about that, Jennifer, is the federal credits are tied to substantial construction as opposed to completion. And I mean, unfortunately, the Trump administration is reconsidering what substantial is, but if you've got substantial construction, then you qualify for the federal tax credit, even if it's not completed by the deadline.
And does clean energy need to be in brackets, or should we take off those brackets?
Yeah, you know what? I added the brackets because it wasn't clear in my summary when I sent it out that it was specifically clean energy projects. Mike, this part was originally yours. To do you want to keep the clean energy clarification in there?
I mean, what I had in mind were renewable energy projects. I'm not sure that there are any other large, difficult to finance projects that may fail for financing reasons. So that was my original thought. If somebody's aware of something other than a clean energy project that is at risk of losing federal funds and is big enough to be trouble financing, I don't have a problem. But really, it's the solar farms and maybe offshore wind that are really at risk.
Right.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So you just don't need the bracket part.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I think we deleted that in the edits. And then I've got lots of helpful word options provided in the chat. I think these are for replacing encourage. Let's see, the latest was assist. So we'll receive financial support to assist construction. Lots of options, clearly. All right, any further discussion on this recommendation?
I think we decided to treat a recommendation as a motion, and then once the amendments were voted on, just simply take a yes or no vote on the revised recommendation.
So just to clarify, we'll be calling a vote to say yay or nay to this recommendation as amended on the screen. Do I have that right, Mike?
Yeah.
Great. Okay, well, hearing no further discussion, we'll use the hands up feature and we'll start with the yay vote. So if you're voting in favor, this is for MWG members, if you're voting in favor of this recommendation as amended on the screen, then please raise your hand. Great. That's certainly the majority. And you know what, one thing I didn't do fully most recently, Jared, if you would confirm the number of MWG members who are with us so that we know what the majority threshold is for voting. Thank you. But that's certainly more than half the majority. Okay. Thank you very much. We'll move on to recommendation number 2. So the draft of this says, adopt a clean fuel standard to reduce emissions from the transportation sector, especially in light of the federal government's rollback of the Advanced Clean Cars and Advanced Clean Trucks program and federal fuel efficiency standards. I think hands are maybe still coming down from the previous vote. If your hand is still up from voting, please put it down. And then why don't we open any discussion on potential amendments to this one? I think Louis, your hand came up, so go ahead, please.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. So I submitted some very simplistic language on this recommendation that literally would just change kind of the opening couple of words to explore the adoption of a, and then just continue on with clean fuel standard. And the reasoning behind that was, I know we heard the presentation from New Mexico and that they're the first state that's not, along the West Coast to move forward with this. I know there's discussions going on in New York and Pennsylvania and perhaps some of the other Northeast states. I just think that, look, I actually like an LCFS more than some of the other things that the state has proposed relative to vehicle adoption. And I think this is a real meaningful opportunity. But I think we need to be looking at it in the context of what other states in the Northeast do as well. I think that there was some work done by NESCOM and as part of the Transportation Climate Initiative that looked at this, but that is a bit dated, and there's a lot of changes with distribution and supply But if we think that just Maryland is going to be able to adopt a standard and we're going to actually get, low carbon fuel, that's probably wishful thinking. And so I think we need to look at this a little bit more holistically and within the context of, what other surrounding states may elect to do in this region. So.
Great. Thank you. Arjun?
Yeah, I just had a question. This is not my area, so this is just kind of education for me. Are there other states? What level of CO2 are we talking about relative to, say, gasoline? Are there other U.S. states? I know Canada seems to have one, but are we recommending some specific clean fuel level, standard level, or what? I'm confused about this.
Yeah, the recommendation that's in front of you all does not set specific targets for the policy, or really parameters for what all is included. And when we look at states that have LCFS or CFS policies, those policies, kind of look different in each state in terms of the eligible measures. It's typically, though, not just a liquid fuel to liquid alternative fuel replacement. Electrified transport is a creditable action under this, so it supports both electrification and transition to lower carbon liquid fuels. But there's much left, obviously, outside of these few lines of recommendation that would need to be fleshed out in terms of what Maryland's approach to this type of policy would be.
Yeah, again, this is not my area, but just as a question is, should it rather be charge the MEA with coming up with a specific recommendation for a clean fuel standard that would work for Maryland?
Arjun, you're actually bringing up an important point, and we should probably, we may want to spend a minute going back to number one on this. The recommendation text, the guidance that we received from the Climate Commission, were meant to identify the state entity taking action, i.e., is this a General Assembly action? Is this an agency action? And then followed by, what's the recommendation and on what timeline? So I'll just put a pin in the fact that recommendation number one, we didn't actually say that in this case, it would likely be a General Assembly action. So we'll come back to that after we finish this, but we should probably, in this case, specify, do you all mean this to be an action for the General Assembly, an action for MDE to explore a CFS, so on and so forth. I will point out, and this might be the same reason why Ian put his hand up, that this type of policy is likely one that MDE and not MEA would explore.
Right. I mean, just to say that MEA is for the most part not a regulatory agency in the way that MDE is. So I would just underscore that point.
Mike, your hand's up.
Yeah, I was going to say much of what Ian was going to say, but I was going to say, I think if I understand this proposal, it really requires General Assembly to authorize. It may be that MDE proposes something, but it doesn't have to be an MDE bill. I think the adoption of the cube fuel standard is going to ultimately require General Assembly adoption. So I at least would have anticipated that this would have been encouraging the General Assembly to adopt a clean fuel standard.
Ian.
I mean, that might be true, Mike, but this just says explore the adoption of. So I'm not sure if the General Assembly would necessarily be the body that this would go to. I mean, it certainly could, right? They could have hearings or they could have a study or whatever, but I think it could also be MDE that could do that exploration. So I guess it depends a little bit on what is meant by this proposed amendment to explore the adoption of, right? And maybe we need to try to clarify that just a little bit.
I think that's it. I agree with you if it's explore, but if it's encourage the adoption, I agree with you. You want to go back to Lewis on the language of the amendment?
Yeah,
Sure.
I'd be open to like conversation. I see there are a lot of other hands up, so I kind of want to let people offer their feedback, but I'd be open to kind of, discussion certainly about changing that language.
All right, thanks. Kim?
Thanks. Yeah, I think explore the adoption is a little vague for me. I mean, that a whole range of actions there, including doing very little. So I liked where Arjun was starting to go down the road that to be a little bit more explicit about calling on MDE to develop a recommendation regarding the adoption of. So that wouldn't really involve the General Assembly. What we're instructing MDE is to do the work so that the General Assembly can move ahead with an adoption that it's been studied, it's been looked at, it's been evaluated.
You're suggesting MDE should recommend develop a recommendation.
Make a recommendation regarding the adoption of.
Okay. All righty, so that's reflected on the screen. Oh, and it's a good point. We're also supposed to put a time frame to it. So while we're on that topic, Kim, do you want to weigh in on when you want my team to write you a report?
I don't know. Is October 1st possible?
Thanks.
That's a joke. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I would say by June 1st, 10 months to a year. But I'm just floating that because I know there's a lot on your plate.
The Climate Commission says jump and we say how high. Alrighty, so the recommendation should be published by June 1, 2026. Tom, I see a hand up from you.
So I guess the previous look at this ran into some trouble because of the regional application. We're a small state. We don't have any refineries. So I think it would be prudent to put in some language to the effect of other steps to increase the production, importation, and use of low carbon fuels, so that the direction to the department isn't only focused on a low carbon fuel standard and it's kind of as a known quantity, but look at other ways that drop-in fuels could help in the transportation sector.
Tom, does that capture well enough recommendation regarding the adoption of a clean fuel standard and other policies related to drop-in fuels to reduce emissions from the transportation sector?
I just put something in the chat. I might be more appropriate to refer to low carbon fuels rather than drop-in fuels more.
Yeah, thank you for providing text. Arjun?
Yeah. Fuel seem to, in my mind, always bring up the liquid fuel or fossil fuel, coal, oil, gas. I was wondering whether low carbon energy sources might be better.
Mike?
Yeah, I think that gets too general, Arjun. It starts to become a whole world of everything, as
Okay.
opposed to really what I think this is about is the debate that happened last year and that's been going on over clean fuel standards for transportation. And I'm worried that if we start broadening it too much, it will no longer mean it'll mean anything anybody wants it to mean, as opposed to what I think this wasn't my proposal, but
Yeah.
whatever the original proposal was.
Yeah, Mike, that wasn't my intent. Of course, it is about transportation. I was just thinking of the earlier comment that electrification of transportation as well as liquid low carbon fuels would be intended. That's why it's sort of confusing to say fuels if electricity is also included.
Yeah, that's part of the vernacular of these programs is that electricity is typically included among the low carbon fuels that are creditable under these programs.
Okay, second time education for me today, so thank you.
No worries. Kim?
I think she hit it by mistake.
Lewis?
Thanks, Mark. I'm wondering, like, two thoughts. Would Kim change language to should make a recommendation? Kim, would you be opposed if it said the Maryland Department of the Environment should study and make a recommendation regarding the adoption of? And then, to Arjun's point, would it make sense, instead of saying a clean fuel standard, and I'm not sure of this, to say a low carbon fuel standard? Or Mike, are you suggesting that probably would not be a path you would recommend?
No, just answer for me. I mean, it's just more that a clean fuel standard is the term used to describe it. I don't have any strong feelings about clean fuel versus low carbon. I think they're the same thing. It's just what's the label that they're known by.
And if you want to add the word study, that's fine with me.
Okay, so we added study. And if it's helpful, adding also that a clean fuel standard is also known as a low carbon fuel standard. Is there further discussion on this recommendation? Kim?
Mark, just a question for you. Is there anything in the language as presented that would prohibit as you were saying, that there's a clean fuel standard can support other transportation mechanisms that reduce emissions? So is there anything in there that would prevent you all from studying that?
No, I mean, that's a common component of these programs. So, I mean, we would certainly be looking at that as well.
Okay.
Yeah, and just to add that, remember, Kim, that all of the prior recommendations remain, and among those recommendations are electrification and mass transit, and so all of those are still recommendations.
Great. And we are noting who all is calling on us to do a study so that we can pass around the hat after this meeting for study support. Thanks for being generous. All right, any further discussion on this? Hearing none, we'll take to voting on the recommendation as adopted on your screens. So please use the little hand raise to vote in favor of this if you want to support the amended version in front of you. And we've got the majority have already voted. By the way, we count 22 members present, so a vote of 12 or more represents a majority of those present. All right, thank you very much. So we'll move on to recommendation number 3. So this is align greenhouse gas accounting and clean energy support programs with emerging best practices. You might recall that this was the subject of last month's MWG meeting. So the slightly longer version, and then there's a lot of context to follow, modify the greenhouse gas accounting for the electricity sector so that it properly credits the impacts of state clean energy programs like RPS and offshore wind that are paid for by Maryland customers, and 2, encourage the General Assembly to adopt legislation creating a zero emission credit program for nuclear reactors located in Maryland, providing environmental benefits to the state. On the first part of this regarding greenhouse gas accounting, Kim Coble had suggested tabling this until MDE was able to provide a little bit more of our response to that proposal. This has to do with the way that we estimate the greenhouse gas emissions for our triennial GHG inventory. If he's still with us, we brought Vimal Amin from our technical division here to describe a little bit of our response and concern about the methodology as proposed. And I will just note up top that this is something that, you know, we work closely with other states to look at best practices in GHG accounting, and people's willing to give us a little bit of insight into some of the hesitation we have around that part 1 of this recommendation. So Bimal, do you want to chime in?
Sure, Mark. You've got 2 hands up. Do you want to take those before I start? Make that 3.
Oh, sorry. Well, how about why don't we lay some context for this first part, and then we'll go to the hands up.
Okay. Okay, sure. Mark, I've got some slides that I could walk through. Do you want me to share those? Or do you want to pull them up since you're already sharing?
Why don't you pull them up? I'll stop sharing this.
Okay, that works.
Thanks.
Give me a second to figure this out. Okay, there we go. Yeah. Yeah, so we have some initial observations around the proposal that was discussed last week. As Mark indicated, these are some of those observations. Generally, we think the rec-based accounting approach could be a useful exercise, could be worthwhile for evaluating the effectiveness of the RPS as a policy. As it stands now, we generally see it as it ought to be a separate ledger from the inventory, some that's supplemental rather than a replacement method as it's proposed. And then, so that's one major point. And then the second being that it's not as simple as it sounds. It requires thorough consideration. And that's whether it's part of the inventory or as a separate ledger. So that goes either way. And just going to the next slide. Yeah. Okay. Just walking through some of these points. These slides are rough. I just threw them together this morning based on my notes. Just first want to address inventory protocols. In the discussion last week, it's largely started with the discussion of GHG protocol. Yeah, it's a corporate standard. It's meant for companies. National governments take inventory guidance from the IPCC. States, we look to the IPCC for guidance. We also look to the EPA state inventory tool and EPA's national and state level inventories for guidance on how we do our inventories. Just one note there is all of those mentioned methods or frameworks are based on developing territorial inventories. So that means, especially for electricity, that means emissions associated or emissions from electricity generation are attributed to where the generation occurs or where the emission occurs. Our Maryland state law requires us to go beyond the territorial basis to specifically incorporate emissions associated with imported electricity. So that's just one sector where we need to go beyond the territorial basis. Just the two boxes here, just pointing out other frameworks, other protocols that are out there that could inform, sub-national level inventories. I won't read through those there. There's links there to more information, but they both seem to indicate, they both suggest that accounting for REC purchases, for example, or other market-based currencies, for example, should be supplemental or separate from the gross emissions accounting. Right. And then building on that again, it's related to how inventories are done. The inventory, it's an accounting of emissions and removals that have occurred in a specific year. One thing we're seeing with the REC-based approach is that it puts the emissions outcome or the emissions result at the whims of policy design features, including the time component, ACP payments, REC multipliers. There's things that are like decision points in the policy design really impact the end result in the emissions figure. Just to give more context on that, regarding the time component, based on the RPS, based on state law, the renewable energy credits created in 1 year can be retired as much as 5 years later. Just for example, in I think the 2020 compliance year, only 45% of the RECs retired in 2020 or for 2020 compliance were actually megawatt hours generated in 2020. So there's that time component, which causes the emissions result to not truly reflect a calendar year that we're interested in the inventory context. The other point is around the ACP payments. If we look at, well, we ran the numbers based on the proposed method ourselves, just to understand what was being proposed. One thing we noticed is that our 2023, under the proposed method, emissions associated with imported electricity would jump up in 2023. And this is even as the PJM grid mix is getting cleaner. And the thing here is that it's not due to any actual on-the-ground change in renewable electricity generation. It's simply due to the fact that our utilities chose to pay the ACP chose more so to pay the ACP in 2023 rather than purchasing and retiring RECs. So it's just laying out that the year-to-year variations are really influenced by policy design features. Other points here are that there's some complications introduced in the approach. One, complications around there being multiple markets. One thing is that REC the proposed method conflates rec purchases with electricity purchases. They're really two separate markets. And there's actually, in the title, I put multiple markets because there's even other markets for those clean attribute credits beyond the Maryland issued recs. So just more opportunities for double counting, triple counting. Just one note I wanted to make about what was presented last week. One basis for the need for a rec-based approach was to be able to count offshore wind credits. Just so side note there that those recs are bundled. So they're the purchase of both the rec and the electricity generation. So just on that basis, Maryland does have basis for claiming that electricity when it comes online eventually, without necessarily a need for a rec-based accounting approach. Just want to throw that out there. Another note was another considerations around double counting. So given these two different markets, rec purchase, electricity purchases, there's opportunity for double counting. There's an example given last week about a John Hopkins project to purchase solar electricity. The university would claim that as a clean generation for themselves, based on the purchasing electricity. But then under this approach, if the utility purchases the rec and retires that, then we'd also be counting that as clean electricity. So there's that double counting example there. Another consideration is around crediting voluntary rec purchases. So with the proposed approach, our statewide accounting would only credit rec purchases that are purchased and retired by the utilities for RPS compliance. I've got an example here to try to illustrate that. Imagine a new large load customer comes into the state. Imagine they locate near a large carbon-free generator. Imagine they enter into a contract to purchase electricity from that generator. And even for more bragging rights, they choose to purchase the clean attributes from that facility. Well, under the proposed approach, our statewide emissions accounting would assume that large load is now being met by fossil plants, the mix of fossil plants in the PJM-wide region. And that's because the rec has not been purchased by the utilities for RPS compliance. And in actuality, the proposed method would treat that carbon-free generation, it would artificially assume that was not existent in the state, nor consumed in the state by that customer with that direct contract, until such time that that carbon-free generation qualified as a qualifying source in the RPS, and until such time that a utility, Maryland utility, purchased that rec from that facility for compliance. And I'm almost done here. I think I just have one more slide. Just a couple other factors for consideration. There's double counting, potential double counting of small scale solar. And this is because of net metering. Small scale solar is not counted in the retail sales that we use to inform statewide consumption of electricity. And so if we're crediting the solar recs associated with that small scale solar against that net consumption, we're pretty much double counting that generation. So the actual megawatt hours are being already claimed by the account holder, the customer, where those panels sit. But then we'd also be crediting the rec purchases against that generation. And then just the other point is, for the rec-based accounting approach to work, it requires consistency amongst all the states in the region. I think this goes to a point Mark made at the start, where we're constantly working with other states through platforms like the U.S. Climate Alliance to evaluate inventory methods and enhance our methods and align methods and for consistency with states. Mark, I'll turn it back to you, unless there's anything more you want me to say.
Thanks, Vimal. You covered it well. Our simple point here is that there's a lot in the proposal to digest, and we're very interested and have learned a lot by digging into it. But certainly something that we want to continue to consider rather than embracing the idea that we shift our inventory methodology right now. I've got hands up from a number of people, and I'll go in order. Sonia.
Sorry, not finding my mute button. I think my hand is maybe still up from the prior, so apologies, team.
Okay, no worries. Jennifer?
So the second part of this proposal talks about nuclear. And so just to be clear, I support extending Calvert Cliffs, and I'd love to see even more nuclear. However, we heard a presentation from Constellation, which was essentially asking us to underwrite as a state the risk, the financial risk, if the prices of energy didn't stay super high, or if the consumption or demand for that energy went down. So I met with Constellation and I said, how much money are you asking for in this proposal that you made to our committee? And it could either be $0, but actually it could be $220 million a year, $220 million a year. And so I wanted to be sure that we're not endorsing putting the state on the hook for $220 million a year for expanding nuclear. So that was my concern.
Thank you. Garrett?
Well, this is Garrett. I share that concern. I was a little bit confused about whether the nuclear piece, whether both parts are moving forward or just the inventory part was moving forward here. But I have quick thoughts on both of those, so for what it's worth. So on the nuclear side, I agree with Jennifer. I'm not convinced that the nuclear thing is something we need to deal with this year, because I don't think the market, I don't see any risk to Constellation right now. I think this is an issue that we should talk about if it appears there is a real risk to Calvert Cliffs, and I don't see it, and I feel like we don't need to deal with this right now. So I didn't vote for this. The GHG inventory side, I think the Constellation team actually did a very good job. So I don't know that I am in full agreement with the Constellation team on this is how the GHG inventory approach ought to work differently than it currently works, the way MDE is currently doing this. But I think that they did a really good job of pointing out to all of us that there could be some problems with the existing methodology. And I think, Vimal just talked a little bit about this is very complex, and you do GHG inventories for different purposes at different scales, and the way you do this to kind of say what's the carbon footprint of an individual business entity, an individual organization, the methodology is different when you're trying to tell the story of what's the carbon footprint of a geographically denoted community, including a whole state. Methodologies are different. You get into a lot of sort of apples and oranges when you try to apply some of these things. And there is potential for double counting. There's potential for inconsistency, causing you to kind of not understand the picture in a useful way. And it's possible to kind of tell that Maryland climate inventory story in ways that are more or less policy relevant for us. But all the reasons that Vimal talked about of where we could get ourselves into trouble revising the methodology, I think are also areas where it's possible the existing methodology is itself not yet perfect. I think that Constellation really raises an important point there, that there might be an opportunity to improve, because already if our existing methodology could be inconsistent with the ways that other states around us are telling their story, and like, are we giving credit for in-state? We could end up in a situation, whether we do now or could shift to, where we're giving credit for all the carbon-free energy that's produced in Maryland to not to be counted as carbon-free and used in Maryland. But then are we double counting when we're using the PJM-wide emission factor for the rest of it? Was it also counted there? We easily get into a lot of complexity. I don't think this is an issue. I think it's an important issue. I don't think this is an issue that deserves to be one of the 4 things that the mitigation working group is working on, because I don't think this is a state policy thing. I think this is a thing, and I think our focus should be on state policy things. So I think this is a thing that MDE should be doing further thinking on. But if we were to agree to move this forward, I think I would be comfortable agreeing to move it forward as a thing that needs to be explored, but not where we're starting from. The right way to do it would be this other specific way that Constellation already has in mind. I think that the actual best way to do it might be not exactly what Constellation has in mind, nor what MDE has been doing so far. And it might be something that's kind of a hybrid or a third option. And it really would be a lot of work over the course of a year for folks to put that time into thinking about it. I again don't think there's urgency to do this, but we should clarify if we're moving forward. If we're saying we're sort of moving forward to get to the methodology Constellation was sort of advocating without all the detail, but there might be more detail behind it, or whether we're moving forward to kind of further explore this, totally unsure of where where the further thinking on methodology might actually land us at the end of the process.
Brian from Constellation. Brian, I'm not sure if you're trying to talk to us. I don't hear you right now.
Hey, thanks. Sorry. Appreciate the work done here to explore the proposal further and kind of understand the implications. It would have been great to see some of this stuff in advance so I could have responded with more depth, but I do have some initial reactions to what we saw here. So I think, first of all, I think that the characterization of this proposal needing to exist separately in a separate ledger from inventory accounting, I don't think that's quite right. I mean, in corporate accounting, market-based accounting and location-based accounting are treated on equal footing, right? So I don't see why that can't be, at minimum, the case for the state. The issue with things like rec multipliers and banking and ACPs, like introducing complications, like those can all be dealt with very easily. All that information is reported to the state by load servers in their RPS compliance reports. So the characteristics of all the attributes submitted for compliance with the RPS, which are the vintage of the attribute, the fuel type, the location of the resource, that's all data that are known to the state. So if it means that certain resources need to be excluded from the inventory because they were from, or the attributes rather, are from previous years, that's easily done. So it's not a complication in the sense that it makes it impossible to follow through with the methodology. This idea that bundling of ORECs changes the problem that the fact that the resources are located outside of Maryland, like the bundling is irrelevant because the resources are still physically located outside of the state's borders and are interconnected in a different state. So the fact that the power is bundled with the ORECs doesn't make any difference in the state's current inventory accounting approach. It just wouldn't appear. So that doesn't matter either way. This example about new large loads purchasing clean energy, but that not showing up in the inventory. So there's room to harmonize voluntary clean energy purchases and purchases made, in connection with the RPS. Like the proposal here doesn't preclude any of that, but it does preclude the state from taking credit for things that it hasn't purchased or customers in the state haven't purchased, which are the resources that are selling attributes to other states and other buyers. So there is no double counting by definition in the way we're approaching this proposal. The current approach includes a fair bit of double counting, and that's the thing that we're trying to fix. So I appreciate the time and thought put into this, but I don't think the material we just saw really accurately captures the reality of what we're proposing here.
Good, thanks, Brian. Ian?
Thanks. I appreciate that. There's a lot of complexity here. Brian, I appreciate the thought that you and others at Constellation have put into the change of inventory. I'll just say, the current system I think has been in place since Maryland started doing this work, right, in the 2009 greenhouse gas reduction law, as well as its subsequent, renewals. And I think that it bears further study to work through some of the complexities. Brian, you talk about things that can be easily accounted for. I think that might be an exaggeration. I think considering we've been with this system for the entire time, I think that Maryland has been undertaking a greenhouse gas mitigation program. My suggestion is that we table this for now. MDE can continue to look at it, and consider what they're comfortable with, come up with a proposal to the extent that some of these changes can be made without legislation. MDE would be able to do that. If a change in law would be necessary, I think that they could come back. We could look at this next year, work through some more of the details would be my suggestion. I just don't think we're ready. We had one conversation and presentation on that this past year. I just don't think we're at the point now that we as a mitigation work group, and my suggestion would be the full commission, has enough of the understanding of the technical details here to make this change or recommend this change at this juncture. And I also question, I think maybe Garrett said, I question whether or not this is of a high enough level of importance for it to be one of the recommendations that comes forward at this time. I just think it needs more work, more refinement at this point. So my suggestion would be that we not move forward with the recommendation regarding inventory. Regarding the second part of the recommendation, I tend to agree with what others have said, that while the state, I think, is on record, MEA is certainly on record, I think the administration, the governor are on record of supporting nuclear energy as a generation option for Maryland. I'm not convinced that at this juncture it makes sense to put ratepayers on the hook for the continuation of Calvert Cliffs at this point. Like I think Jennifer mentioned that there is a real potential ratepayer cost. So I'm not in favor of either of these recommendations at this juncture. Thanks.
Thanks, Ian. Arjun?
Well, yeah, Ian has simplified my job a great deal. I agree with him. I just want to point out that $30 a megawatt hour as a zero emission credit to Calvert Cliffs is $400 million a year. That would be in addition to anything new, I think, which is what Jennifer was talking about. So I think this thing should be scrapped. There are other worthy recommendations that we could put in its place as a fourth one. Let's table this whole thing. The other thing I wanted to say is some of us who follow the nuclear industry know that the Trump administration is in the process, has issued a bunch of executive orders in regard to nuclear energy in the process of thoroughly, basically revamping the safety and radiation protection rules that we have. And I think if we're going to do anything, we should have, I understand those who are promoting nuclear energy, and you all know I'm not in that bracket, but I do understand it's a zero carbon source. But I think we should temper our whoever support with the idea that, we're not going to have any meaningful federal safety regulations if these executive orders and basically, undermining of the NRC as it exists is actually implemented. And I think we need to take stock. Each state will need to take stock of that. So one more reason to just, not go forward with this now.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Pauline?
Hi, thank you. Just in addition, I wanted to note a couple concerns that we had with the second prong at OPC. So pursuant to the Next Generation Energy Act, the Public Service Commission had opened PC 71 in part to develop a report for the General Assembly by January 15th, 2026 that will address the status of developing regulations for the establishment and purchase of zero emissions credits, and then also whether any legislative action is necessary to implement the zero emission credit provisions in the Next Generation Energy Act. So we're just concerned that this recommendation would sort of prejudge the Commission's ongoing efforts in PC 71. So thanks.
Okay, got it. I'm also, for everyone's awareness in the background, trying to figure out if the group did not advance recommendation number 3, I can identify what the next highest ranking priorities based on the online voting were. I think there's a tie for two additional recommendations.
Okay. Now remember,
yeah.
Mark, that the instructions were 3 or 4. It wasn't that we must spend 4. It was no more than 4.
Yeah, good point. Bob. Bob, I don't hear you.
Oh, okay, sorry, I didn't hear you. Well, I like the remarks that both Garrett and Ian have made. And starting with modify was pretty strong to begin with. But what I don't want to happen, since I think some issues have been raised by Constellation, that somehow this all slips under the rug and there's no follow-up in terms of looking at what the pros and cons are of greenhouse gas accounting. So my comment is I'm agreeing in general with everyone, but I don't want to lose the thought that some issues have been raised and that we need to, when I say we, MDE or someone, maybe MEA needs to address them. So if we don't vote for this, does it go away somehow and we lose this opportunity?
Well, I'll react to that in general regarding the GHG accounting question. This is a topic that we are discussing with other states, and we are in a continuous improvement process and working with states to look at best practices for GHG accounting. So in that respect, it won't be going away for us because we're always looking at opportunities to do our inventory as accurately as possible. Mike.
Yeah, I have much the same concerns that Bob does. I mean, MD just makes a presentation criticizing Constellation's proposal without anything about what's wrong with the existing system, which we all know has severe breaks with it. And the proposal then is to not mention it at all. I mean, MD has not advanced any proposals for making changes to this system. Constellation did. The idea that we would be silent and just assume that something will happen when the existing system, in my opinion, is broken, I have problems with. I think we ought to be saying something on the issue. And similarly on the nuclear issue, look, nuclear is proceeding in other states. There's an SMR being put in Tennessee right now, announced this week. You cannot assume that just because we have Calvert Cliffs that somehow we are going to maintain the kind of nuclear generation we need. I mean, my firm does more solar farm permitting than anybody else in the state, and I can tell you we are not going to build enough solar farms to meet Maryland's quota. It will not happen. And I think the odds of offshore wind happening are very, very low. So if you're not going to put your money and your attention where nuclear is, then I think you're abandoning a clean energy goal. So that's my 2 cents anyway.
Okay, I appreciate those comments. And I guess I'll flag for our team here that we were planning on presenting a briefing this fall to the MWG on the final emissions inventory for 2023. You might recall that we presented preliminary results to you all a few months ago. Perhaps when we share the final results, we can also discuss some of the improvements that we've been making to the inventory to better estimate emissions sources and sinks in the state. Is there any additional discussion on this recommendation before we bring it to a vote? Okay. Then we will handle the voting as we did before, starting with all in favor. You can use the hand raise feature. If you're in favor of advancing recommendation 3, then please put your hand up. That looks like 8 votes in favor of advancing it. All right, we'll move on to no votes. So if you would all put your hands down, and then once those hands are down. Okay, so the hands that, if you're raising your hand right now, then you're registering a vote of no on advancing recommendation 3 to the commission. All right, we've got an abstention. That's fine. Okay. So I think that we had 8 in favor and 9 opposed. So recommendation 3 will not be advancing to the Climate Commission. All right, so then moving on to recommendation 4, develop a heat pump market transformation roadmap. The recommendation is, in 2026, the governor should direct the Maryland Energy Administration, Maryland Department of the Environment, Department of Housing and Community Development, Department of Labor, Maryland Clean Energy Center, and any other relevant state agency to collectively develop a heat pump market transformation roadmap that aligns with the state's heat pump deployment goals as detailed in resources like the Climate Pollution Reduction Plan and the NESCOM state's MOU on accelerating the transition to zero emission residential buildings. To kickstart this transformation in 2026, the governor should direct relevant agencies to develop and implement a targeted heat pump deployment program for households currently using electric resistance and delivered fuels for heating. The same agencies should partner with local HVAC contractor networks, heat pump manufacturers, unions, and others to develop and launch a new heat pump workforce development and training program. Despite its length, it does technically fit with the Climate Commission's requirements on the number of sentences. So any discussion on this recommendation? Arjun.
Yes, I did have sort of a slight addition to make, that window heat pumps, especially for renters, should be emphasized within the heat pump deployment. Efficient window heat pumps.
I'll think about just the right spot to put it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Maybe there. Okay. Mike?
Did you put in the word efficient window heat pumps? Because that's
Sure.
so critical. Otherwise, you have electricity consumption going crazy.
Got it. Mike?
Yeah, I was a little confused about just what is the targeted heat pump deployment program amount to. Are you talking about basically heat pump deployment in new construction? Or are you talking about a forced conversion of existing systems to heat pumps, even if it's not new construction or new renovation, because that makes a very big difference in my mind. If we're talking about encouraging or even building codes for heat pump, that's one thing. If we're, I've talked before about the fact that Class B buildings in downtown Baltimore have over a 30% occupancy, vacancy rate. If you start telling them that they've got to pull their existing system and replace it with heat pumps, they'll all turn their keys in. So my confusion is just what is meant by that. Without knowing what that means, I don't think I can support it. I mean, if it were like we've done in some of the others, explore the concept so I knew what the details were going to be, that would be something I'd be more comfortable with.
So this recommendation came from Climate Commissioner David Smetic, and I see that he's on the line. So David, do you want to address Mike's question?
Yeah, I'll do my best. And I very much view Dr. Makajani's amendment there friendly. Perfect addition. And Mike, to your question, I did not view this as I was drafting up as any kind of like regulatory hammer or stick approach to it. It's much more intended to note that we have in the Climate Pollution Reduction Plan, as well as in the NESCOM MOU, U.S. Climate Alliance agreements, et cetera, stated that, I forget the exact numbers off the top of my head, but a number of heat pumps and that we're really looking to deploy across the state. And when I'm looking at it from a market transformation perspective, I'm looking more at the point of failure of technology, of existing technology. How are we ensuring that our market is ready to have, more often than not, the standard of replacement be an efficient, low carbon or electrified source, primarily heat pump, because I think that's probably the way it's going to go. So this is more looking at how are we actually going to achieve those targets that we're looking at. There's a similar program, public-private partnership that was developed in California called Heat Pump Partnership, where they're saying, working with manufacturers, with labor unions, commercial building owners, et cetera, on how they're really going to hit their, I believe it's 6 million heat pump installation target by 2030. And so, funny enough, I remember that number and not Maryland's off the top of my head, but how we're actually going to get that together. So that was the intention for this one, was to look at more that market transformation piece rather than a regulatory stick approach. Although I know the state is looking at different regulatory approaches, this is more of, if we're going to have those targets, are we going to be ready for it?
Can I suggest some language that might clarify that? Because what I focused on was the implement a targeted heat pump deployment. If what we're talking about is encourage and incentivize heat pump deployment, I think I feel much more comfortable with that.
Yeah, I don't remember. To your point, Mark, this is a lengthy one, but I don't think that would come up to any issue. I think that would probably be a friendly amendment. I would just need to see the writing of it. But
okay, I think it would be down where it says develop and implement, and then put develop.
Oh, got it.
A targeted heat, or make it encourage and incentivize targeted heat pump deployment. You probably leave out the word program.
Typically for the electricity delivered fuels.
Yeah.
That would be an incentive. That when I was cooking it up in my head, yes, it was more of an incentive program. I know NEA's looked at how they could leverage what we hopefully get from the federal dollars to target some of those households anyway. So this is kind of what I was thinking of.
So Mark, what I would do is take out develop and implement and say to encourage and incentivize.
All righty. All right, thanks. Tom.
Thanks, Mark. I was a little bit confused here because I don't think this language is the same as what was circulated for the voting portion of our, private deliberations. I am a little concerned about the reference to other documents as detailed in. I'm not sure they're consistent, like the Climate Pollution Reduction Plan and NESCOM. Have, I think, different targets probably, and calibrating anything to our 20 by or 60 by 31 is something that was, I think, already determined in the electrification study to require 100% of new sales to be heat pumps or similar equipment by 2030. So that's a different approach than, and endorsing a different approach than the kind of encourage and incentivize language that's in here. So to me, it would be better if it was phrased more along the lines of what was originally distributed in the July 25th document, and including the language that Michael suggested.
All right, I am looking back at the version that was subject to the online voting. I think that it matches with the black text. Oh, some of it got cut off there due to limited number of words, but it does appear to match with the black text that's on the screen.
Okay, I was reading from the July 25th circulated draft, not the polling text. But my point remains the same, that the adoption of these things by reference and endorsement of them, I think, confuses the recommendation, because it could be read multiple ways. I think it should be cleaned up and more rely on its own statements rather than the incorporation by reference of other documents.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. The quick response, I'm open to referencing something else there, or my intention for those were, those are documents and goals that the state of Maryland has endorsed and adopted in different ways. I'm not saying they're perfectly consistent. To be clear, I do think there's probably a little bit of nuance and difference between some of them. But that was the intention, is they are goals that the state has signed on to. And so that was why I tried to include them, and maybe provide a little bit of flexibility of which one the market transformation roadmap would actually hitch its wagon to, which I recognize is probably a little bit confusing. Yeah, so we could try to narrow it a little bit if we need to.
David, do you have a suggestion on how to narrow it? I mean, I think let's see.
Yeah. For the Climate Commission, I mean, we primarily look back at the state's climate plan, so that would be my gut reaction. Tom, I don't know if that's the one you were thinking of to be most consistent with it, but I don't personally have an issue with the NESCOM MOU. I think that's also a pretty good goal.
Tom, any reaction to
maybe an alternative way to do this is to leave them in, but replace aligns with informed by.
I wouldn't have a problem with that. If others do, feel free to jump in, but I think that could work for me, Tom.
That is it, removing aligns, so we're not going on a straight line towards the targets in all those documents, but
Okay,
I don't think I have any other comments. Thanks. Appreciate that.
thanks, Tom. Ian?
Thanks. I guess I just wanted to point out two things. One is that I think this recommendation is already consistent with state policy in these areas, which I think is what David was trying to convey with some of those references. So, we're all on board with that, so I won't belabor it. And then the other thing is the second part that talks about electric resistance and fuel, fuel oil, that's used in a good part of the state, actually. Those conversions, right, will both drive the greatest greenhouse gas reduction as well as provide the biggest energy savings for those households. So that's like the lowest hanging fruit. And that's also consistent with MEA's plans, including for some of the federal rebate money, should we ever receive it under the IRA. And so I just wanted to highlight that aspect of the recommendation. I mean, getting homes off electric resistance heat is good for reducing load. It's good for reducing emissions, right? And it's good for saving money. And then fuel oil, obviously, much more expensive and emission intensive as well. So I just wanted to highlight that part of it.
Thanks, Ian. That was the exact reason I had that as the primary focus for that kind of program. I think it's good for us to get more heat pumps in homes, targeting those, and then we can scale them to other fuel sources as we continue working on it. One other quick question on this, Mark, because I don't see another hand up, but there was another, at least I think, sentence, maybe two, from the original earlier July draft in this. Maybe it pushed it to 4, so if that's probably part of the problem, let me know. But it was also referencing legislation from last year that did not pass, but it was to ensure that the CEF has the flexibility to do electrification work. And I don't know if MEA, Ian, feel free to jump in and comment that you don't think that's needed as a recommendation anymore. It was a bit different than what we had recommended as a commission last year and what the MWG had recommended. But that wasn't the original draft that I had put forward and I think had been discussed. So I don't know if MEA, if you all think that's still needed. If you don't, we can move on with our lives. But I do think that it was a direction in the recommendation to the General Assembly to make sure that CEF statute was updated to allow electrification.
I have a version that the MWG saw in a previous meeting, and I don't see that CEF language included. So sorry, because I'm not able to confirm if we once considered CEF language in this recommendation.
There had been an effort to merge 2 CEF recommendations into one, and I think that element got lost. But it was there earlier, so I do remember that, David.
I can put it in the chat, Mark. It was from the July meeting. I believe that mine is on page at bottom of page 3 and rest of page 4.
Okay, thanks. And I'm looking here, and you're saying
it was the first sentence of the draft that's in that July packet. And if some of this needs to move offline, because I know we're just having more of a one-on-one at the moment, it feels like feel free to let me know.
Oh, I see it now. The top line, the General Assembly should authorize the use of CEF for grants and loans for building electrification.
Right. And it was similar to HB 1273 from past session.
Okay. So I think that captures that line. I'm not sure why it just turned everything green, so apologize for that. But I think that captures the edit from the previous version.
Thanks. And to the conversation earlier in the meeting, to Dr. Makajani's point related to limited income household bill assistance, the HB 1273 that this is kind of alluding to did not change the RGGI proceeds formula, which is where that bill assistance is primarily focused. This was just about the optional ways that MEA could approach spending the energy efficiency and clean energy funds, if I remember correctly. Ian, correct me if I'm wrong on that.
It just more explicitly added it as an authorized use of the CEF.
Okay, so further discussion on this recommendation. Hearing none, we'll go to voting. Please use the hand raise feature if you want to vote in favor of advancing this recommendation to the Climate Commission as amended on your screens. Okay, and that's got enough yay votes to advance. Thank you very much. Okay, so we have now amended and voted to advance 3 recommendations to the Climate Commission. Protect CEF and support clean energy projects that are in development, recommend the adoption of a clean fuel standard, and develop a heat pump market transformation roadmap. I'll kick it to Kim and Mike to decide if you want to entertain any of the additional recommendations or if the group wants to decide to advance these 3 and be finished with your recommendations for this year.
I have a suggestion, Kim, if you want to go first. What we could do is describe, because I'm concerned that people may not be prepared to discuss because they weren't on the agenda. And of course, we're not required to do 4, but what we could do is summarize what the next 2 are and see if there is a majority who are interested in considering either of those for further discussion. And then based upon that, we can decide, can we do it today or do we need to add another meeting? Or alternatively, if there's not a majority interested in discussing them, because my hesitation is just there are people who probably would have studied the issues that were on the agenda and haven't thought through others. But this is off the cuff because it's not something we prepared. So Kim, if you've got some other view.
I do think that given the quantity of issues that this committee has dealt with and continues to deal with, that if we have the window to make one more recommendation, we should at least discuss it, because there's a lot of people with a lot of ideas up there. So I'd hate to lose the opportunity to not put one forward. I'm comfortable with giving an overview in the last 10 minutes and then setting another meeting to discuss them. Although we have discussed both of them are topics that are we're all well versed in. So maybe we could proceed with trying to figure out if people are interested in voting or discussing it.
Yeah, what were the next 2 vote counts, Mark, if you can?
Yeah, so the next 2, which are tied in terms of the online voting, fortunately they're both short. Ask the Moore administration to take the next steps on developing a cap and invest program per the Climate Commission's recommendation in 2024. And the other one that had an equal number of votes in the online voting, reallocate state funds, if possible, from CEF to provide additional rebates for purchasing EVs and or charging equipment. So the group could decide if it wants to advance one of those two, which would to be included in your top four.
You are right that those are ones where we probably don't need a lot of additional discussion on. Do you want to, trying to think, do you want to have the discussion, Kim, or do you want to take a vote on whether to have a discussion on them one at a time?
I think, look, I would say let's go ahead and discuss them.
What's the first one in order, Mark? Because they both got the same number of votes, is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
And how many votes?
Let's see. Of the members that did the online voting, both of these had 6 votes.
Can I just make a question?
Yeah.
So those two that are left there that are tied, one of them is essentially reemphasizes something we already agreed to last year. So it didn't seem new to me because it's reemphasizing what we already agreed to. And the other one on reallocating the CEF, I think is contained to some extent in what we already just passed as a group in terms of electrification in what Dave just gave us. So I had proposed in the chat something brand new. Nobody has voted on it, but it could reduce electricity demand by a fairly significant amount. And I just put it in the chat. It is very late in the process to enter something new, so you may not want to consider it, but I wanted to point out that it is in the chat.
Jennifer, I don't see it. What is the specific item?
Okay. The Maryland legislator and governor should enact legislation to reduce unnecessary and energy-intensive uses of AI and internet technologies. This could include prohibiting state agencies from accepting or using cryptocurrency Bitcoin, given its exceptionally high energy consumption, strengthening protections to protect minors from accessing online pornography, and requiring search engines and other digital platforms to make AI-enabled tools opt-in rather than automatic, given users' choices to minimize wasteful default AI processing.
Thank you.
I mean, my reaction, Jennifer, is that I don't really think it's fair to the group to have a brand new one. I think that is definitely something that could be considered next year, but I'm just thinking that all of the discussions that went on to develop these recommendations, I'd hesitate to get in something complex. Though I acknowledge because I had much the same comment on the next two, which is one of them I think is really duplicative of one that we've already got in large measure. There is a difference that it says to take the next steps as opposed to implement. And the allocate state funds, we obviously talked about CEF. This is, I think, a little bit different because, and what qualifies it as different is because it's a specific subset of issues. But I'd be concerned, and my own personal view is to be concerned about adding a new and very complex issue to this discussion. Kim, you got thoughts?
I agree. I love the idea, Jennifer, but there's no way that we can take on a new topic at this point. And Jared pointed out, we've got to have these recommendations wrapped up by the 4th of September. So that complicates things as well.
Thank you.
So I would suggest then that we consider whether there is a majority present interested in either of these two issues that were the next vote counting. But we'll of course have to give everybody the opportunity if they want to suggest language changes like we did with all of the other provisions as well. You want to take the first one?
Can do. Recognizing that there are some hands up, but we'll move to discussion on alternate number 1. Ask the Moore administration to take next steps on developing a cap and invest program. Any discussion on that? Sonia, I've got a hand up from you. Oh, hand came down.
Yep,
All
sorry
right,
about that.
Pauline. No problem. Pauline?
Hi, thanks. In our comments that we made on this on the form, we just had a suggestion about adding to the recommendation that any development of the cap and invest program should stress that low-income customers should be held harmless for any costs associated with the program. So specifically, like a percentage of the dividends generated could be distributed to low-income customers. So that was, yeah, maybe something. Mm-hmm.
Does that
Yeah,
capture
I think so. I think it could be worth specifying just that our suggestion was that a percentage of the dividends generated should be distributed to low-income customers, but open to discussion about that.
All right. Kim.
Yeah, I actually support this recommendation. This group knows better than anybody that the climate plan set out all the steps to meet the goals and indicated we need $1 billion, and nothing really has been done in order to fund the programs that's going to help us meet the goals. So this one is what the plan recommends, and the administration can move forward on their own to develop the plan. And I think why wouldn't we be recommending that they take the next steps in order to do so? And Pauline, I love the added amendments, so I completely support those as well.
All right. Noting for the group that we're just about out of the scheduled time. Kim and Mike, do you want to extend the meeting by a few minutes to complete amendments and voting on these 2 alternates?
I think that's what we need to do, and just ask people to be very brief in their comments.
I agree.
Okay. Mari.
Thank you. I would just suggest on language that instead of saying I'm developing a cap and invest program, that we write developing an economy-wide cap and invest program as a way of noting the REGI program that already exists.
Got it. Thanks. And that is consistent with how we've called it in the climate plan. Thanks. All right. Any other? Yeah, Arjun.
Yeah. This distributed to low income customers sounds like, we're going to distribute money. I think should be invested to fully integrate low income customers in the energy transition and the clean energy transition. Something like that would be my thought for that. I don't know what Pauline would think of that change.
I will note that other programs do distribute funds, like, in the form of checks or subsidies and utility bills to low income customers. So
Could be done.
that might be Pauline was coming.
Yeah. I'm open. Don't feel strongly. It's just, yeah.
Why don't we, in the interest of time, then, if there's no other comments, call a vote on that one, because we still have another one after this.
Yep. Alrighty. So thanks, Tom. So we will okay, so this is voting on alternate 1 as amended and highlighted now on your screen. all in favor? And because people are leaving, we'll do a yes, a for and a opposed on this one, because I'm not quite sure how many members we have right now. So we'll just have the yays versus nays on this. We've got 10, 11 in favor, 12, 13, 14, 15. Okay. Well, that's 15 in favor is, since some members left, certainly enough to constitute the majority.
And
all right.
it takes us to 4, which is our maximum.
That's right. So does that mean you don't want to entertain an alternate to?
Well, with that many votes, well, I guess let's go ahead and take a vote on the second one then, because if it got equal number of votes, we'd have to decide what to eliminate.
Right. Okay. So then, in a moment, don't put hands up yet. In a moment, we'll vote on alternate 2. If alternate 2 winds up with greater than 15, then it would be the one to be included in your top 4 for the Climate Commission. So alternate 2, just to be clear, is allocate state funds, if possible, from SEEP to provide additional rebates for purchasing EVs and or charging equipment. Very quickly, is there any discussion on this before you go to voting?
I would take out purchasing EVs and keep charging equipment.
I think that's okay. I mean, we just got to put something, because the federal loss is so low that nothing's being sold right now, I think. So you could take out EVs and just make it charging equipment.
Okay, any additional discussion on this one? Ian?
In 60 seconds, it's true that Maryland MEA is funding community charging stations. Those funds were from the governor's $90 million announcement from 2 years ago. That money is running out after FY26. So one way to write this would be, rather than reallocate, it could be reiterate or continue to provide those rebates. Just a suggestion.
I like continue.
Okay, that's it. Yep.
Continue to allocate.
Up front here.
Continue to allocate. And since I proposed this one, I'm going to treat it as a friendly amendment from me.
Got it. Gary?
So I foresee us generally thinking this makes sense, and now we have a trouble if we have 5. But in my view, this one is a lot like the other. In the first 4, we had one about the SEEF where we're saying, please make sure we're spending the SEEF money on the kinds of things it's supposed to be spent on. To me, this is another example of the kinds of things it's supposed to be spent on. And I wonder if, rather than get into trouble where we have 5 and don't know what to do, could we actually just add this language into the other one on SEEF and end up with 4?
The problem, I wouldn't accept it as a friendly amendment, because the problem is, I think then you lose the focus on this. What's happening is the General Assembly is not continuing the funding of the program. And if it's just part of the general discussion of SEEF, it won't get singled out. For this, I think, to have any kind of focus, it needs to be singled out.
Any further discussion on alternate 2? Okay, then we will take to voting. And let's see, Brian mentioned in the chat that he needed to leave, and that was following the last vote. So if the vote count for alternate 2 were 14 or more, then it would, or 15 or more, then it would beat out alternate 1 to be advanced to the commission. Mike, did you have a comment before we go to voting?
No, oh no, I was just going to say, if it falls 1 vote short, you may ask Brian what his vote would be. So since he's the only one who left in between, I think.
Okay, got it. Okay, so if you're in favor of advancing 2 and 1, it advanced ahead of 1, then please vote now by raising your hand. Okay, I see 6 in favor of that motion. So I think that with that, it is alternate 1 that will be included in the group's top 4. And the only remaining business, as far as I know, before I kick it to the co-chairs, is the actor in recommendation number 1. Is this a recommendation to the General Assembly?
To me, that is a recommendation to the General Assembly because it's really budgetary.
Okay. Okay, is there any disagreement with that?
Do we want to specify that in 2026? Do we need a time frame on that one?
Oh, yeah, it's a good flag.
Yeah, probably so.
I'll just raise that it's FY 27, even though it's in 26. You can
That's
parse
okay.
that however you want.
I would make it for fiscal year 27 rather than 26.
All right. Good enough?
And I think we need a time frame on tap and invest, and I would say in 2026.
Okay. Any disagreement on the Moore administration to take next steps in 2026 on developing yada yada? All righty. Okay, then to Kim and Mike, any further business?
No, just to thank everybody for hanging in there.
Yeah, I appreciate everybody taking the extra time. Congratulations on mission accomplished in August.
And just procedurally, these recommendations will be forwarded to the Climate Commission next month. The Climate Commission will spend some time this fall discussing the recommendations from all of its working groups before submitting its annual report to the Governor of the General Assembly in December. We'll be back in touch regarding future MWG meetings. We have some thoughts on different agenda items that are still relevant for this fall. So look for email communication from us down the road on that. But we've taken enough of your time. Thank you very much and have a great day.
Take care.
Thanks, everybody.